Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving way past the surface to uncover the brilliant, incredibly complex inner lives of land's heaviest mammals. Yep, we're going straight into the mind of the elephant.
So I want you to ask yourself, what animal actually mourns its dead, paints pictures, and can understand the pointing of a human finger? I mean, just imagine a creature with the heaviest brain on land, one that pulls off feats of cognition rivaling our closest primate relatives. Well, that's exactly the biological marvel we're exploring today.
Section 1. Anatomy of a giant. The sheer physical scale of the Indian elephant. Before we get into the mind, we've got to understand the vessel, right? Let's establish a baseline before we peel back the layers.
So there's some pretty significant sexual dimorphism in the Indian elephant species. Basically, the male's massive. They average 2.75 meters tall at the shoulder and can weigh up to a whopping 4,000 kilograms. Meanwhile, the females average about 2.4 meters tall and weigh up to 2,700 kilograms. And physically, the Indian elephant looks distinctly different from its African cousins. They've got these really beautiful convex backs and broader skulls with concave foreheads.
Now check this out, 150 kilograms. That staggering number is the amount of daily plant consumption required just to fuel this mega herbivore. Think about that for a second. They actually spend up to 19 hours a day foraging for grasses, leaves, and twigs just to hit that incredible dietary requirement and keep those massive bodies moving.
Moving on to Section 2, inside the elephant brain, unpacking a 5-kilogram biological marvel. Let's peek inside their heads, shall we? We're looking at a brain that packs an absolutely astonishing 257 billion neurons. To put that into perspective, that's roughly 3 times the number of neurons you have in your own head.
But, to truly understand what all those neurons mean for intelligence, scientists look at something called the EQ, or encephalization quotient. Basically, this measures the size of an animal's brain relative to its body size. It's a super important metric used to estimate how much an animal relies on complex learning and problem-solving rather than just pure hardwired instinct. This really brilliantly illustrates what elephants stand in the animal kingdom. Humans, as you'd expect, sit at the top with a 7.44 EQ. But look right down below the chimpanzee, the Asian elephant comes in at a 2.14. They are right up there. They're basically our cognitive cousins, rivaling the great apes and sitting way, way above the dogs and cats we share our homes with. And beyond just raw size, their brain architecture is absolutely fascinating. They possess spindle neurons, which are specialized brain cells directly linked to highly intelligent social behavior. It's an incredibly exclusive club. We only share these neurons with elephants, great apes, and certain dolphins. On top of that, elephants have a massive, highly convoluted hippocampus. Now, this gives them exceptional spatial memory to, say, remember distant water sources. But it also means they process emotion deeply. And because of that, they're genuinely susceptible to psychological flashbacks and even PTSD.
All right, Section 3. Empathy, death, and society. Deep social bonds and the capacity to grieve. Let's see how this incredible brain architecture actually translates into profound emotional depth and tightly knit matriarchal societies. I really want you to let this gripping quote from ethologist Cynthia Moss sink in. She's describing a family of wild elephants reacting to a poached family member named Tina. Quote, "They managed to get Tina into a sitting position. Teresia then put her tusks beneath Tina's head. They began to bury her in a shallow grave and throw leaves over her body. This is a documented, absolutely heartbreaking ritual. When an elephant dies, the entire herd grieves. They try to lift the fallen, they literally weep, they fall completely silent, and they bury their dead. They'll even return to gently touch the bones of their ancestors years later."
But here's the thing, their empathy isn't just reserved for their own kind. These examples of altruism will blow you away. They actively aid unrelated injured elephants. In one amazing documented case over in India, a working elephant flat out refused the trainer's command to lower a log into a hole simply because a dog was sleeping inside. They've been observed walking backwards just to avoid stepping on a human. They've even stood guard over injured human herdsmen, or gently placed branches over humans who were just sleeping under a tree, trying to protect them. Their empathy completely crosses species lines.
Let's dive into Section 4, Problem Solvers and Artists, Insight Learning and Creative Expression. Let's look at how they apply causal reasoning to solve complex puzzles and, amazingly, even create art.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that they don't just blindly react to their environment, they think in logical steps. Walk through this string drawing task with me. First, the elephant pulls a bungee cord attached to food with its trunk.
Second, it realizes the cord is going to snap back, so it secures the rope using a foot or its mouth. Third, it repeats these coordinated pulls to inch a sugarcane log closer. And finally, it disengages the food and eats. I mean, this proves a highly advanced, multi-step processing is happening right there in the elephant's mind.
And then there's the wild anecdote of Bandula. Bandula was an Asian elephant in Marine World Africa who figured out how to unlock these complex Brummel hooks to free herself from her shackles. But honestly, the most amazing part, she used deception. She would purposefully fiddle with the locks and wait to make sure no humans were watching before executing her escape. And then she'd immediately go and help the other elephants in the enclosure escape too. That is calculating, highly adaptive behavior.
Now consider the mirror test. This is widely considered the ultimate test of self-awareness. A lot of animals fail this. They react to a mirror as if it's a completely different animal standing right in front of them. But elephants, they pass. In a really famous Bronx Zoo study, an elephant named Happy repeatedly touched a painted X on her own head when looking in a mirror. She knew the reflection was her. This puts them in an elite, highly self-aware group alongside great apes and dolphins.
And their intellect extends deeply into the arts too, showcasing an astonishing capacity for mimicry and creativity. Get this. Elephants can distinguish 12 distinct musical tones and actually remember them years later. An elephant at the National Zoo named Shanti played the harmonica and reportedly always ended her songs with a crescendo. They can create abstract art with paintbrushes, they can mimic the mechanical sound of passing trucks, or, in the absolutely fascinating case of a captive elephant named Kosik, he imitated Korean words like sit and no by putting his trunk in his mouth to manipulate the sound. I mean, they are true intellectual heavyweights.
Okay, Section 5, the Indian elephant, the endangered flagship species of Asia. The really crucial point we have to address now is that despite all this immense intelligence, the Indian elephant, which makes up 3/4 of the mainland Asian population, is highly endangered. You can see here just how fragmented the remaining populations are across Asia based on recent estimates. India holds the vast majority of these animals, with over 27,000. But look below that at Myanmar, Thailand, and Malaysia, the numbers drop sharply right into the low thousands. These populations are, tragically, becoming increasingly isolated from one another.
Which brings us to Section 6, Fighting for Survival, the deadly collision between giant and man. We have to look at the tragic irony of these highly intelligent, socially complex beings trying to navigate a landscape absolutely filled with man-made threats.
Even within India alone, the elephant population is heavily restricted and geographically fractured. Almost half are in the south, about a third in the northeast, and much smaller pockets exist in the east and north. Because of rapid human expansion, these 27,000 elephants are essentially trapped within 138 identified corridors. This heavily fragments their population and completely cuts them off from traditional, vital migration routes. And honestly, the modern threats causing this rapid population decline are truly grim. We're seeing direct habitat loss from expanding human populations. There are deadly, frequent collisions on railway tracks that slice straight through those forest corridors. Hundreds of elephants have died from electrocution from exposed power poles and transformers. Poachers still hunt them for ivory, which drastically skews the male-to-female sex ratios since mostly males carry large tusks. And finally, there are brutal capture methods used to supply the tourism industry, where wild calves are forcefully separated from their deeply bonded herds.
Now, this collision between human expansion and elephant populations brings us to a highly complex and deeply debated topic, culling. Now, we're looking at this neutrally, just reporting on the material straight from our sources. The debate essentially centers on whether to actively control elephant populations through managed killings. On one side, some scientists and environmentalists argue that culling is a tough but necessary step when localized overpopulation threatens regional biodiversity and resources. But on the exact opposite side, animal rights advocates and other conservationists insist that culling such highly intelligent, empathetic, and self-aware creatures is entirely inhumane and morally wrong.
Which leaves us with this final, haunting question to close this explainer. It was actually posed by a South African animal rights group during one of these very population debates. How much like us do they have to be before killing them becomes murder? I want you to leave with that thought. Consider our deep responsibility to these sentient giants, these brilliant, artistic, grieving minds sharing our world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.